when it comes to, when people ask, what translation do you use, do you prefer? I kind of say, I actually just prefer reading, the Greek and Hebrew. But if you can't read Greek or Hebrew, which would be maybe most of you, except maybe a few of you on staff, the next best thing is this. Read from multiple good translations. That is the next best thing to reading Greek and Hebrew. And that means reading from different types of Bibles. In other words, different Bibles are translated according to different translation philosophies. So you have the more literal or word-to-word translations. Now, I'm going to kind of dispel a myth. Word for word is not always better, because it can be, word for word can be very literal and wooden, and it can be much harder to read, and sometimes you just don't understand because of the idioms don't make sense in our English language, in our modern terms. So it's good to have a good word for word translation. It's good to even have a good paraphrase. Now, there's bad paraphrases, and there are ones that aren't so bad. And then have one that's kind of middle of the road. So I would read from kind of all, different ones. The Old Testament has a lot of idioms and sayings that don't make sense when it's translated literally. But when you have a paraphrase, you can read that and be like, oh, that's what that idiom means. So that's where you want to use. I would never just use a paraphrase by itself, but it's good to use a literal along with a paraphrase and read them together, and then find where there's differences and see where there can be kind of this broader meaning of certain words in certain texts. So that would be my suggestion. But if I were to say of the literals, I would say ESV is good, NASB is good literal. King James can be good if it is very beautiful with a literary, but sometimes it's not as modern. It doesn't communicate, and sometimes there's some texts that they view that wasn't in our earliest texts. But those are some good ones. HSB is good. And there's a newer HSB that I can't remember what that is. But then NIV can be okay. Of course, sometimes people say, oh, they don't like that. But I think if here's the main thing. There's no perfect translation. That's a good takeaway. Read many different translations, and there's no perfect translation. But there's New Living Translation could be a not bad paraphrase, but I would make sure that you read with a word-for-word translation.